For 6 months, my wife insisted our marriage needed work and that her monthly retreats were saving us. But she had no idea I'd been watching her every move for months. I encouraged her retreats, unaware they were with someone else. Last week, I learned those retreats were actually romantic getaways with her yoga instructor, funded entirely by our joint accounts. She withdrew $178,000 thinking I'd never notice, while attempting to access another $425,000 from my inheritance. She was wrong about a lot of things. My name is Darren Chen. I'm a 39-year-old software engineer in Portland, Oregon. For 10 years, Diana and I had what everyone called the perfect marriage. We lived in a modern townhouse in the Pearl District that we'd renovated ourselves over 2 summers. She ran a successful marketing consultancy from the converted loft space while I worked downstairs in what used to be the garage. Weekends meant hiking the Columbia River Gorge or driving out to Willamette Valley wineries. We had routines that worked. She made coffee every morning at exactly 6:15. I handled dinner most nights because she genuinely couldn't cook anything beyond toast without burning it. Diana had been there through everything. The brutal 80-hour weeks when I was building my startup. The nights I'd fall asleep at my desk and wake up to find she'd covered me with a blanket and left a sandwich on the side table. When the acquisition finally happened and we suddenly had real money, she insisted we celebrate by taking that trip to Japan we'd talked about for years. She never acted like the success was hers, never demanded credit, just smiled when people congratulated us and squeezed my hand under the table. The inheritance came 6 months after the acquisition. My Aunt Elaine left me $587,000 when she died at 82. She'd been the woman who took me in after my parents died when I was 14, worked double shifts at the hospital to put me through college. That money wasn't just cash. It was a promise she'd invested in me when no one else would. It represented decades of sacrifice and belief in my future. Diana's changes started gradually. First came the meditation retreats, weekend trips to Mount Hood or the Oregon coast for what she called spiritual alignment. Then she enrolled in a yoga instructor certification program at a studio downtown. I paid the $3,200 tuition without hesitation. She'd always been interested in wellness, and after years of supporting my career, it felt right to support whatever made her happy. The monthly retreats became longer. 3 days became 4, then full weeks at centers in Bend or Ashland or sometimes California. Our life together started shifting in small ways. Fewer dinners at the kitchen island where we used to talk about everything. She developed new friendships with people from her yoga community that she'd mention casually but never really explain. Her phone habits changed too. Always face down on surfaces, quick to flip it over when notifications came through. When I'd walk into a room where she was texting, conversations would end abruptly. She started going to bed earlier, waking up earlier, keeping different hours that gradually separated our schedules. The financial questions began 3 months ago. Casual inquiries about where exactly the inheritance money was held, which bank, what type of accounts, whether we should consider moving it somewhere with better returns. She'd bring it up during commercial breaks while we watched Netflix or while she was getting ready for work in the morning. Did I think it was smart to keep that much money in one place? Had I looked into investment options? Would it be complicated to transfer funds between accounts? I'd nod and say I'd research it, then forget about the conversation entirely. Her phone stayed locked with a passcode I didn't know. She'd changed it from her birthday to something else and never mentioned it. Conversations became shorter, more functional. Where did you put the electric bill? Do we need milk? What time will you be home? The easy intimacy we'd always had faded into polite roommate interactions. She traveled more frequently for work, or at least that's what she told me. Marketing consultations in Eugene, brand strategy sessions in Seattle, networking events that required overnight stays. I told myself these were normal growing pains. 10 years into marriage, people changed. Diana was discovering parts of herself she'd never explored. I respected that, even admired it. Some couples grew apart. but I believed we were strong enough to grow and come back together. I trusted her completely, even when that little voice in my head started asking questions I didn't want to answer. Last Thursday night, I was working late in my office, debugging code for a consulting project, when the email notification popped up on my screen. Diana's name in the sender field. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. Pacific time. She was supposed to be at a retreat center in Arizona with no Wi-Fi access until Sunday. I clicked it open and read 4 sentences that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The email header revealed more than Diana's betrayal. She claimed to be at a retreat center in Sedona with no internet access, but the metadata told a different story. The IP address traced back to Scottsdale, Arizona, specifically a luxury resort where rooms start at $800 per night. Not exactly the Spartan meditation center she'd described over dinner 3 weeks ago. I opened our shared Google Drive and started clicking through folders we'd created over the years. Tax documents, home renovation photos, vacation planning spreadsheets. Everything looked normal until I reached a folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas that I'd never seen before. Inside were screenshots of my online banking dashboard, detailed notes about wire transfer procedures, and photos of documents from my aunt's estate. One image showed a yellow legal pad with my social security number, account routing numbers, and the exact balance of the inheritance fund written in Diana's handwriting. The planning went back 8 months. She'd saved articles about divorce asset division laws in Oregon, screenshots of my security question answers, and pictures of my passport and driver's license, taken from angles that suggested she'd been documenting everything while I slept or worked downstairs. The folder contained 47 files total, each one dated and organized like a project timeline. In that moment, I realized every question, every retreat, had been part of her blueprint to betray me. Our joint credit card statements revealed the scope of her deception. While she'd told me about weekend yoga retreats, the charges showed romantic restaurants in wine country, couples spa treatments, hotel rooms consistently booked for 2 people. February showed charges at McMinnville's premier steakhouse on the same weekend she'd supposedly been doing silent meditation near Crater Lake. March had charges for dinner at Le Bernardin in Portland when she claimed to be at a women-only wellness retreat in Bend. I checked our cell phone account and found location data that contradicted every retreat story she'd told me over the past year. Her phone had pinged towers in Napa, Sonoma, and Half Moon Bay during times when she'd supposedly been offline in remote meditation centers. The data showed regular patterns of movement between Portland and California coastal towns. Always on weekends, she'd said she needed space to find herself. Diana had created a new Instagram account under the name Diana Chen Martinez. The photos showed her with a man I recognized from her yoga studio's website, Tyler Rodriguez, the instructor who'd supposedly helped her achieve her teaching certification. The pictures spanned 6 months and told the story of a relationship that had nothing to do with spiritual growth. Wine tastings in Willamette Valley, hiking trails near Mount Hood, dinner dates at restaurants I'd never heard of, but had apparently helped fund through our joint accounts. I researched Tyler and found his previous relationship had ended when his ex-girlfriend discovered him stealing from her business account. Sarah Morrison, a massage therapist in Eugene, had filed a police report in 2019 after Tyler transferred $23,000 from her business, checking to his personal account while they lived together. The charges were dropped when he paid restitution, but the court records painted a clear picture of his approach to relationships with financially successful women. Diana had been methodically documenting our entire financial life. She'd photographed tax returns, investment statements, even the safe combination written on a sticky note I'd foolishly left in my desk drawer. Her notes included detailed information about my work schedule, when I typically checked bank accounts, and which security questions I used for various financial institutions. She'd created a complete roadmap for stealing everything we'd built together, plus my aunt's legacy. Instead of the crushing devastation I expected to feel, I experienced something closer to cold clarity. Diana had handed me a complete record of her betrayal, documented in her own words and actions. Every lie was time-stamped. Every theft was photographed. Every manipulation was saved in digital format that would stand up in any courtroom. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair. Diana believed she'd successfully stolen my inheritance and that I'd discovered it only after the fact. She had no idea that her months of careful planning had created the exact evidence I needed. But there was something else she didn't know, something that had been bothering me long before that Arizona email arrived. 3 months before that Arizona email, Diana's casual questions about the inheritance had already triggered my suspicions. She'd ask where exactly the money was held, which specific accounts, whether we should move it somewhere with better returns. The timing felt calculated, always when I was distracted or making coffee, like she wanted answers before I had time to think about why she was asking. I called Rita Wallace in February, my aunt's attorney who had managed the estate. Rita understood how my family approached money. Conservative, protective, suspicious of anyone who showed too much interest in wealth that wasn't theirs. She'd known my aunt for 20 years and had watched her build her savings through careful planning and an almost paranoid attention to protecting what she'd earned. Rita listened to my concerns without judgment. I explained Diana's recent behavior, her sudden interest in diversifying investments she'd never cared about before. Rita didn't ask me to elaborate about my marriage problems. She focused on the facts and legal protections available. Within a week, she'd moved the inheritance into an irrevocable trust structure that made the money completely inaccessible to anyone except me, regardless of what happened in my marriage or any future legal complications. The trust company installed monitoring software that tracked every attempt to access, view, or transfer anything connected to the accounts. The system created detailed logs with timestamps, IP addresses, and location data for any suspicious activity. It also monitored our shared cloud storage for downloads of financial documents or attempts to export account information. Little did Diana know the trust company's alerts were already logging her every move. The monitoring system started generating alerts in March. Someone had attempted to log into the trust accounts using password variations that matched information Diana had access to. The system blocked each attempt and documented the failed login details. The IP addresses traced back to our home network during hours when I was at work, and Diana was supposedly preparing for her yoga certification classes. Meanwhile, Diana had been systematically transferring money from our joint checking and savings accounts, believing she was accessing the inheritance. Over 4 months, she moved money in small regular transfers that wouldn't trigger automatic bank alerts. The funds went to a new account at Northern Lakes Credit Union, opened under her name with an address I'd never seen before. Our bank's fraud prevention system had been documenting Diana's research into transfer protocols and security procedures. She'd spent hours on their website learning about wire transfers and how to move large sums without triggering federal reporting requirements. The bank kept records of every page she viewed, every form she downloaded, every tutorial she accessed while logged into our joint account. I received weekly summaries of all this activity, but chose not to stop Diana's transfers from our joint accounts. I wanted her to believe she was succeeding, while the monitoring system created an unbreakable record of her theft. Each transfer she made added another documented crime to her growing list of financial misconduct. Her confidence grew with each successful withdrawal, making her bolder and less careful about covering her tracks. The trust company had recorded 3 separate attempts to initiate major transfers from the inheritance accounts. Diana had somehow obtained routing numbers and account details, probably from documents she'd photographed months earlier. Each attempt was immediately blocked and flagged as suspicious activity. The system captured screenshots of her failed transfer requests, including the amounts she'd tried to move and the destination accounts she'd attempted to use. Her email confession from Arizona provided the final piece of evidence I needed. She'd just admitted in writing to stealing money she believed was my inheritance, while simultaneously documenting her location at a luxury resort with her boyfriend. The email created an undeniable connection between her theft attempts and her affair, establishing clear motive and intent for every crime she'd committed. Rita had everything ready for immediate legal action the moment Diana sent that email. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of what she'd been doing with our money. The bank statements revealed Diana had been systematically draining our joint accounts for 6 months. She drained over $178,000 in small transfers carefully timed to avoid alerts. Each transfer happened on days when I worked late or traveled for consulting projects, timed perfectly to avoid my notice. Knowing she'd funded her new life on my dime felt like salt on an open wound. The destination was Cascade Community Credit Union in Bend, Oregon. Account opened in Diana's name alone with an address at 847 Ponderosa Lane that I'd never heard her mention. The credit union was 3 hours from Portland, in a town where Diana claimed she'd only visited for meditation retreats. The account statements showed regular deposits matching our missing funds, plus additional income from sources I couldn't immediately identify. Diana had been constructing an entirely separate financial existence while sharing our bed and eating dinner at our kitchen island every night. The credit card statements revealed payments for apartment rent, Pacific Power electric bills, and Cascade natural gas service, all tied to addresses in Central Oregon. She'd opened utility accounts, established internet service, even arranged for garbage pickup at properties I knew nothing about. The bills spanned 8 months, meaning she'd been building this parallel life since before her first meditation retreat story. Our shared Visa showed charges I'd attributed to her business expenses. What I thought were client dinners and professional development were actually furniture purchases from West Elm, mattress deliveries from Sleep Country, and kitchen appliance orders from Williams-Sonoma. She'd furnished an entire second home using our joint credit while I paid the bills each month without questioning the merchant names. My neighbor Janet knocked on my door Tuesday evening while I was reviewing financial documents. She'd been walking her dog past our house and wanted to ask about the moving truck she'd seen several times over recent months. Diana had been loading boxes from our garage with help from a man Janet described as tall, with dark hair and a beard. They'd worked quickly, always during weekday afternoons when I was at the office. Janet assumed we were donating items to charity and thought it was nice that Diana had found a volunteer to help. The moving truck explained why our garage had seemed more spacious lately. Diana had been systematically removing items I'd barely noticed were missing. Art we'd bought together during trips to Seattle and San Francisco, electronics from my previous apartment that she claimed we didn't need, even furniture from the guest bedroom that I rarely entered. She'd been liquidating our shared possessions and converting them to cash for months. I found her eBay selling account under the username Oregon Wellness 2019. Listed items included our KitchenAid mixer for $285, the vintage leather armchair from my grandfather's house for $650, and electronics worth thousands of dollars sold at below-market prices for quick cash. The most devastating discovery was her engagement ring, listed 3 weeks ago with the description, "Beautiful solitaire from ended relationship, quick sale needed." It sold within 2 days for $1,800, about half what I'd paid 5 years earlier. Tyler Rodriguez had a clear pattern that became obvious once I started investigating his social media history. 3 previous relationships with professionally successful women, all ending when he moved on to someone with better financial prospects. Before Diana, he'd been involved with Sarah Morrison, the massage therapist whose business account he'd raided in 2019. Before Sarah, there was Jennifer Walsh, a real estate agent in Medford who'd filed a restraining order after discovering Tyler had been forging her signature on checks. Diana's text messages with Tyler revealed the coaching sessions she'd been providing about my daily routines and security habits. She'd taught him my work schedule, when I typically checked bank accounts, and which days I traveled for business. The messages showed Tyler asking detailed questions about my relationship with money, how closely I monitored our finances, and whether I'd noticed small transfers from our joint accounts. The last year of our marriage had been pure theater, while Diana executed a complete exit strategy designed to leave me financially destroyed and emotionally devastated. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of apparent intimacy had been performance art hiding systematic theft. She'd used her own methodical approach against herself by creating an unbreakable paper trail. Now I had everything I needed to respond with the same systematic precision she'd used against me. I called Sarah Kim Friday morning at 8:47 a.m. Sarah specialized in financial fraud cases within marriages and had handled similar situations where spouses systematically stole from each other while maintaining the facade of normal relationships. I'd found her through Rita Wallace, who'd worked with Sarah on previous trust-related disputes. Sarah listened to my summary without interrupting, asked 3 specific questions about documentation, and scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. Sarah's office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in the Northwest Industrial District. She reviewed Diana's email confession first, then the bank records showing systematic withdrawals, the trust company logs documenting attempted transfers, and the monitoring data that captured every step of Diana's operation. Sarah spread the documents across her conference table and studied them for 20 minutes before speaking. The evidence constituted clear, financial misconduct under Oregon law, she explained. Diana's email provided written admission of theft. Her own words created an airtight case, turning suspicion into solid proof of intent. We filed divorce papers within 48 hours. Sarah cited fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, requesting immediate asset freezing for all accounts Diana had accessed or opened. Oregon's divorce laws allowed for accelerated proceedings when financial fraud was documented this thoroughly. Sarah also filed requests to freeze Diana's new accounts at Cascade Community Credit Union and to prevent any further transfers or withdrawals until the court could review the evidence. Diana discovered the frozen accounts Tuesday afternoon. I was working in my office when my phone rang at 3:22 p.m. Her number appeared on the screen for the first time in 8 days. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message 20 minutes later. Her voice sounded different, shaky, and confused. She explained that there must be some kind of banking error because her accounts had been frozen and she couldn't access any of her money. She asked me to call her back immediately so we could figure out what was happening together. Her attorney was Philip Barnes, a family law specialist in Bend, who'd apparently assured Diana that her case was straightforward. Barnes had initially approached the situation with confidence, telling Sarah during their first phone conversation that his client had acted within her rights as a spouse, and that the inheritance should be considered marital property regardless of its trust structure. Barnes's tone changed completely after Sarah sent him copies of Diana's email confession, the systematic withdrawal records, and the monitoring data showing attempted fraud. Barnes requested a 3-day extension to review the evidence more thoroughly. Diana called me again Thursday evening. This time, I answered. Her voice was barely above a whisper, as she tried to explain that everything was a misunderstanding. She'd never meant to steal anything, she said. The inheritance transfer was supposed to be temporary, just moving money to better investment accounts that would benefit both of us. She claimed Tyler had convinced her that I wanted the funds moved, but was too busy to handle the transfers myself. The explanation made no sense and contradicted her own written confession. But she kept talking, her words tumbling together as she tried to reconstruct a version of events that didn't involve deliberate theft. Tyler abandoned Diana the moment he learned about the legal implications. Her friend Jennifer, who worked at the yoga studio, told me Tyler had moved out of their shared apartment in Bend and returned to California within 48 hours of the accounts being frozen. He'd left Diana to face everything alone, taking only his clothes and leaving behind furniture he'd bought with money, stolen from our joint accounts. Barnes withdrew from Diana's case Friday afternoon. He sent Sarah a brief letter explaining that his client had misrepresented certain aspects of the financial situation, and that he could no longer provide effective representation given the evidence that had come to light. Within days, her accounts were frozen, her lawyer withdrew, and she faced fraud charges on top of the divorce. Diana accepted the settlement terms the following Tuesday. She would return every penny stolen from our joint accounts within 30 days, relinquish all claims to the inheritance, and sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The settlement also required her to transfer ownership of any assets purchased with stolen funds and to provide complete financial disclosure for the past year. Diana's hands trembled as she signed the papers. She looked across the table at me once during the signing, her expression showing complete recognition of how thoroughly she'd miscalculated every aspect of her plan. The divorce was final within weeks, leaving me to figure out what came next. 6 months later, I discovered something unexpected about freedom. Living alone in the townhouse felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. No more checking my phone for messages that never came. No more wondering where she really was when she claimed to be working late. No more pretending our conversations about weekend plans weren't exercises in careful deception. The silence wasn't lonely. It was honest. I sold the Pearl District townhouse in March and moved to a smaller place in the Alberta Arts District. The new apartment occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse, with exposed brick walls and windows that faced east toward Mount Hood. The space cost half what our mortgage had been and put me walking distance from 3 coffee shops and the consulting office I'd rented downtown. Moving day took 4 hours because I owned so little worth keeping. Most of our shared furniture belonged to memories I wanted to forget. My aunt's inheritance became the foundation for something she would have understood. The Chen Foundation for Architectural Scholarships launched 6 months after my divorce, providing education opportunities for underprivileged youth who'd lost parents. The program partnered with community colleges and architecture schools across Oregon, reaching kids who'd never imagined they could design buildings or create spaces that mattered. My aunt had worked double shifts to put me through college. This felt like the same principle applied to helping others build their futures. Friends started reaching out again once Diana was gone. Tom and Lisa, our neighbors from 2 houses down, invited me to their annual barbecue for the first time in 3 years. During the evening, Lisa mentioned how uncomfortable Diana had always made her feel at social gatherings. Diana would monopolize conversations, redirect attention to herself, and ask personal questions about finances that crossed normal boundaries. Tom said he'd noticed Diana checking her phone constantly during our dinner parties, typing responses to messages while other people were talking. They'd both sensed something wasn't right, but hadn't known how to bring it up without seeming intrusive. Jennifer from the yoga studio called me in April with updates about Diana's situation in Bend. Tyler had moved on to his next target within weeks of abandoning Diana, a massage therapist in Ashland with her own wellness practice and successful online business. Diana had been working part-time at a health food store while living in a studio apartment near downtown Bend. Her savings account, depleted by legal fees and restitution payments, left her financially unstable for the first time in her adult life. Jennifer said Diana had aged noticeably in the months since the divorce, looking tired and defeated whenever she came into the studio for classes she could barely afford. Emma and I met at a tech meetup in July focused on nonprofit technology solutions. She ran a coding boot camp for women transitioning into tech careers after other professional setbacks. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours, covering everything from startup failures to family history to financial transparency in relationships. Emma had been through her own experience with a partner who'd hidden debt and gambling problems, so she understood the importance of complete honesty about money from the beginning. With Emma, I built trust through transparency, sharing passwords and financial goals openly from day one. We discussed major purchases, shared investment strategies, and planned for retirement together. But we also preserved individual autonomy over our personal finances. Trust worked differently now. I maintained separate accounts alongside our shared expenses, not out of paranoia, but because independence felt healthier than complete financial entanglement. The difference between reasonable protection and paranoid isolation became clear through practice. Healthy relationships could handle transparency and boundaries simultaneously. Diana sent me an email in September, 8 months after everything ended. The message contained 2 sentences apologizing for the pain she'd caused and acknowledging that her actions had been inexcusable. No explanations, no requests for forgiveness, no attempts to justify what she'd done. I read it once, felt a brief sadness for the person she might have been in different circumstances, then deleted it permanently. The email changed nothing about my current life, and that indifference felt like the ultimate indicator of how completely I'd moved forward. Building something meaningful from betrayal required more than just moving on. It demanded creating something that would outlast the damage someone else had tried to inflict. The foundation work started immediately after the legal dust settled. Diana's plan to steal my aunt's inheritance created something she never intended. The Chen Foundation now reaches thousands of young adults each year, teaching them to recognize financial manipulation and build genuine security. Her betrayal forced me to honor my aunt's legacy in ways I'd never considered while married to someone who saw her life's work as an opportunity for theft. The most effective response to betrayal isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's using their actions as fuel to build something meaningful they could never touch or understand. She thought she'd robbed me of everything. What she really gave me was the chance to rebuild stronger. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.